Welcome back to the M365 FM, where we sit down with Microsoft MVPs, engineers, founders, and industry experts to explore the technology shaping the future of work. Today's guest is Fergus Kidd, Microsoft MVP, co-founder and CTO of Fieldpal AI, and someone with a fascinating journey from development computer vision systems for the ExoMars mission to build AI solutions that empowered frontline workers. We discuss today Azure AI Foundry, Agentic AI, mod, Multimodal AI, Microsoft Copilot, computer vision, field operation, and what's really takes to build AI systems that deliver measurable business value outside the traditional office environment. If you're interested in Azure, Microsoft AI, and so on, yeah, say welcome to our guest. Let's dive in. Welcome, Fergus.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast, Marco.
There's one thing I think this is really cool. You started your career working on the ExoMars rover. How
Yeah,
did it happen?
yeah, and it's still in a warehouse. It's still not on Mars, which is the most disappointing thing, I think. But yeah, when I was at UCL in London, I got the opportunity to work on some of the software for the camera system, which is
Mhm.
kind of what triggered my journey into AI. That was about 2013, 2014, so pretty um, early on compared to what we have today, right, with large language model agents everywhere. Um, we were really looking at how, there's a substantial delay between communications from the Earth to Mars. So how can the rover itself do more at the kind of edge at the front line when it's driving around? Sadly, it's never left Earth because of various geopolitical things that have happened since then. But maybe one day. I'm fairly sure they built it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. For a short time, I read a joke. Why astronauts, why rockets run on Linux because they cannot open window in the space. Uh, so what I think a Mars rover not working on Windows or something. How was your journey into the Microsoft ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. So after that, I spent a couple of years working in the kind of space and defense sectors, but mostly working on programmatic AI. So looking at machine learning models, Python. But it was kind of obvious very early on when you're working in that AI space that compute was the limiting factor, right? If we think about the Mars rover, we had huge compute limitations because they could only send a certain size of hardware out there. But as we started to look at other projects, especially around computer vision at that time, we had to look to cloud.
Yeah.
So Microsoft was an obvious choice. Azure was still young at that point, but have kind of been involved in the early days. I think AWS was like a big competitor, but really I focused in on Azure for a few reasons. One being, I guess the main one that you'll be familiar with is just everybody's there. Everybody's in Microsoft. Everybody has an Outlook account or Teams or something. So
Mm,
it's where everyone is and it's where the helpful stuff is for doing
mm.
our jobs, I guess.
Yeah, this is awesome. Um, when you look back, what lessons from space research still influence your work today?
That's a really good question. I think definitely that idea of well, I'd say two things. One is that the ExoMars rover is just a kind of good example of a worker on the front line, right? It's a pretty unique front line and it's a pretty remote environment. But the same things that we need to consider for a, a, a rover on a different planet are kind of true for the kind of workers that I'm working with today. So we work a lot with garage technicians. We work a lot with health and safety people who might be up wind turbines in the
Mm,
North Sea, um, scaling electricity infrastructure, at the top of pylons. And actually, their problems are the same. There's a limited amount of stuff that they can carry with them. There's
mm,
a limited amount of connectivity. They're not going to be connected 24/7. Um, yet they're expected to be doing more and more and more, making
Mm,
more repairs faster, documenting what they're doing, all sorts of stuff. So in a kind of weird way, they're very similar. But I think what really carries over in my interests in computing and AI is that ability to do more at the edge. So,
mm,
you know, I think we've seen over the last year or so, particularly, a really interesting shift back to on premise, on edge, on device for the things that can be done there. You know, Azure and the cloud are amazing tools, but if we've got the ability to do stuff at the edge, we kind of should, because it's quicker, faster, cheaper, and more kind of resilient in terms of you're closer to the person you're
mm.
trying to help. So if you can do something in the edge and not send it off to the cloud, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, you have also or your background is physics. Does this shape your approach to engineering?
I think so. I'm not sure if it's kind of worn off now after all these years, but I think so. I think what I always say to people joining the workforce or interested in computing and AI is that that kind of scientific grounding gives you a really analytical approach, a statistical approach. I think, especially today, you probably see it with your guests all the time. There's a lot of people building things because it's cool. And I love building things because it's cool. That's part of why I'm an MVP, right? But I think having that ability to kind of step back, look statistically at the outcomes that you're really trying to look at, especially in an enterprise situation, I think that's really helpful. So I'm really keen on like A/B testing when we change features in our platform. I'm really keen in like measuring real output results
Mm,
and generating like real statistics. So I think that's definitely come from my background.
mm. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. You are a knowledge worker, and most conversations around Microsoft AI focus on knowledge worker. Why do you believe frontline workers deserve more attention?
Um, because there's more of them. It's just an obvious answer. I think, especially living and operating in the Microsoft ecosystem as we do, we s- we're kind of in this bubble of, oh well, everyone has Teams, everyone has access to SharePoint, everybody uses Outlook, and that is true in our bubbles in our spheres. It was true for the last 10 years of work that I was doing at larger corporate firms. But it's not true for the majority of workers who are actually out there doing things. I mean, we have clients who don't even have email addresses, which blew my mind. I was like, how do you even send them a paycheck? Um, but that's the reality of the world we live in. I can look up the numbers, but it's something like 80% of the workforce doesn't sit behind a desk.
Mm,
Uh, Yet the majority of what we often talk about in terms of AI and agents and Copilot is focused at those people sat behind a desk. So I became really interested in like how we can support those 80% of people, those frontline workers, who
mm,
are often, in my experience over the last year and a bit, doing really, really inefficient things because they're not on devices all day, they're not on computers all day, they're not using ChatGPT in their spare time. They're doing stuff with their hands. They're fixing heavy machinery. They're doing inspections of industrial sites and things like that, where they're just not able to carry around a laptop and have them with them all the time. So yeah, a lot of them are on phones and tablets and have access to some great systems, but sometimes that's disconnected. Another thing that's come up in the last year and a half for me, which is super interesting, is that when we're talking to managers and people who are sitting behind desks, looking across a spectrum of work and looking at
mm.
what's going on, those people often have the answers that frontline workers are looking for. If a frontline worker has a question, they'd probably today ring up a manager or try and find that information through a human. That person is sat at a desk and has access to it, and it's almost always in a SharePoint repository somewhere, right? So that information exists and it's searchable and it's findable, but it's not in the hands of the people necessarily who need it. So yeah, we at Fieldpal we kind of became really interested in this idea of like how do we put the stuff that already exists, the knowledge within organizations that already exists in the hands of our workers.
Awesome. That's really, really interesting. What are the I say unique uh, problems the frontline workers have, um, and why traditional software often failed with with field workers?
Yeah, it's down to a number of reasons. I would say the number there's a couple of big ones. One is connectivity. A lot of the people we're working with are only, even in the world of 5G and in mobile internet everywhere, they're only probably connected for like an hour out of an 8-hour day,
Mm,
whether that's because of actual mobile network or Wi-Fi coverage or whatever it is. But really, it's because they're doing something else with their hands. They can't be at a device for these other hours a day. Yet they're expected to do like a lot of uh, reporting and other things. So it's like, well, how do we help them if they're not that kind of connected? There's a few ways we can do that. So I work quite a lot with RealWear, who produce these kind of headsets,
mm,
and they're actually like wearable compute headsets. So it's kind of like having a tablet on your head at all times, using that voice, voice first AI systems and things like that to
mm.
um, uh, actually help. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really, really cool. That is really cool. Um,
Yeah, they're super useful as well because they're completely voice controlled, so I can be doing stuff with my hand. I've got a
mm,
camera, even a thermal camera up here. And there's also different versions of wearable. This is a device from a company called Vuzix, which is obviously a lot smaller and just kind of sits
and
here, kind of attached to a hard hat or whatever PPE.
and this direct, you get the information direct in your eyes, or how is it working?
If you're connected, right? So if you're connected to, I mean, there's a number of things we can do on here. So like RealWear have Teams integration, for example. They have an app. I can just say, call my manager, and like I'll pop into them on a Teams call, which is really great. And a lot of people are using that already.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, if I'm disconnected, how do I answer questions?
mm,
It's kind of like our biggest challenge. But the second biggest challenge with frontline workers is because they're not sat at a computer, they're not using mobile devices all day, every day. A lot of them are kind of unfamiliar with using devices like these.
mm,
They're used to using pen and paper, so they
mm,
kind of all default to that. So our big focus is just make everything as easy as possible. If we have an app on here, make it as easy as possible to use. If we have an app on the phones or the tablets, make it as easy as possible to
mm.
use. Like,
Yeah,
because that's a huge barrier to entry is I have to learn another tool.
uh,
And what I found really interesting is like working with people in automotive, you give them a tablet and they're like, I need to learn how to use it. I need to invest time and energy into using it. But show a tablet that gets like car diagnostic readings out or some other like highly technical information, they pick it up like that. So for me, it's kind of like how do we reframe this as not a complicated system, but just a tool that you're using to do a job, right? And I think that's quite important as well.
yeah. I think also Microsoft had built such a tool. I think it's called HoloLens. I don't know what's happened there.
Well,
Yeah.
you'll have to get somebody more in the know than me on that. But yeah, I mean, what, 5 years ago now, maybe we were doing a lot of work on HoloLens as a fully kind of AR spatial platform. And it had some really, really interesting use cases. Um, and obviously like full spatial awareness. So if anybody listening or watching hasn't tried one on, it's basically like a full headset goggle with
Mm,
a through display, but you can get 3D spatial awareness.
mm,
Really amazing for doing some of the stuff that we're doing at Fieldpal, which is around inspecting site
mm,
inspections and things.
mm,
But for the price and the learning curve,
mm,
a lot of technicians in those situations just prefer to use mobile devices, right? I can speak into it, I can take a photo, I can write any notes that I have, and I'm kind of done. The HoloLens as a full AR platform was quite heavy. The nice thing about these, I would describe these more as like wearable compute than augmented reality, that they just sit in front of you and give you access to the information when you're looking down at it. So you can ignore, I could talking to you, I can ignore it completely, or I can kind of glance down and see a small screen with some information on it. For us, the real unlock of potential has been about voice.
mm,
Everybody, you know, um, everybody's used to using their voice to talk to other humans. So allowing us to talk to for things that we need to get done, whether that's looking up information or whether that's reporting on information, I think that's, you know, the HoloLens is a great device, but it's kind of overkill for some of the
mm,
things that we're trying to do.
yeah. Did you know if they still develop the whole lens, or is it also retried?
As far as I'm aware, it's retired. I think there's there's still use cases in which HoloLens 2 are still operating. I know they did. I did some really interesting mentoring for a project at UCL where students were putting training videos and like 3D models in the HoloLenses for the medical sector. So people could kind of get an idea of if they're in the middle of a surgery, like what that looks like and have a much more immersive experience. There's definitely still projects going on like that. But as for the production of like a HoloLens 3, I don't think we'll see that, sadly. But we work with a lot of wearable compute partners outside of Microsoft, and I think there are some really exciting things going on in the hardware space. I think it won't be too long before we see kind of like products like the Meta glasses come a long
Yeah,
way, like screens and all sorts of cool stuff in that format, which is really, really interesting as well.
yeah, that's cool. I think the yeah, Meta what was this? Because I think Google starts really early with building this. I don't know how I forgot the name for
Yeah,
their
it was the
smart.
Google Glass, right? It was just a
y-
little thing
Yeah,
there, yeah.
and I think also Facebook or Meta has the Meta Quest, I think,
Yeah.
and yeah, and there's it's looked like there's upcoming beside these big players, or these big players retired the most project, I think. A lot of smart companies coming up with smart glasses. Why did you think the big ones failed so yeah heavily?
I think honestly, I think the HoloLens is separate. I think that comes down to the cost of manufacturer. Those were really high-end innovation devices, and they were just too expensive for the enterprise. What we're finding is customers of ours who have technicians in the field do not want to spend any money on devices or hardware because they will get broken. The reason that we work with RealWear is because these are fully ruggedized, like you can smash these to pieces and they will carry on working. Hopefully, they're really and there's even a more ruggedized version, and they've got all sorts of accreditations, etc. So that's the only one I've can see that like are really working in those heavy industries, just because of the form
Mm,
factor and the kind of damage control. A HoloLens, $3,000. I wouldn't want to drop it on the floor, but
mm,
that's what happens in the reality for these devices. Why I see the other big players like Meta and the Google Glass failing
mm,
is they're just not the right devices for the enterprise, right? As a developer, I can't easily build enterprise apps for them. They don't easily integrate into where enterprise workers are. So I can't, for example, very easily connect my Meta glasses through an app to dump photos into a SharePoint repository. Therefore, it's not useful to the enterprise, right? Whereas on the RealWear and Vuzix and other
mm,
companies that are producing those, I'm free to build my own Android. They're all Android devices, so I'm feel free to build my own apps, and then I can use the integrations through Azure or through the Microsoft ecosystem to actually build kind of like a custom app that works for me in my enterprise use case. Because otherwise, they're just off the shelf consumer devices. We get asked questions a lot for reporting. Okay, so say I'm at a chemical manufacturing site and I want to go around and I need to take photos of certain pieces of machinery and provide fixes. People say, "Oh, couldn't I wear a pair of Meta glasses and it just takes a photo of what I'm looking at?" Yes, but I can't integrate that into our app or your backend systems.
mm.
So what do you want to do? Take 100 photos, then drag and drop them, upload them to Google Drive, then download them from Google Drive into it just the flow is interrupted and then it never takes off beyond like a
Mm.
proof of concept.
Yeah, but for the end users, I think there was I don't know Meta has invest, I think, billions of dollars in their VR environment. Microsoft has built Mesh. What's okay? It's now in Teams.
Y-
The function. Why did they fail so hard?
I think it's just wrong product for the audiences.
Yeah.
I think I do believe that Meta will continue to make VR gaming platforms. I think that's a great use of the technology. It's just a consumer market. Um, do people do people really want meetings in 3D virtual spaces? You know, we did it quite a lot when I was working at Avanade. It was a bit gimmicky, and then nobody ever scheduled it that way going forward. It was a great toy to play with. And then the second reason is just the cost. That was a premium feature of Teams. To do any customization work, you needed to have special add-ons in Azure, which we didn't build at the time. They were expensive to run, and the 3D environments were kind of expensive to run. So versus just chatting on a web call, is the benefit there? No, not really. And it's the same reason why people aren't realistically using HoloLens devices in industrial settings or aren't using Meta Quests outside of training rooms and training environments, just
Mm.
because it's just not the right solution for the enterprise, sadly.
And yeah, that's really cool. Let's talk a little bit about Fieldpal AI. What inspired you to start Fieldpal AI, and which customer problems yeah, did you try to solve first?
Yeah, so our founder James actually came out of RealWare. He was head of software there, and so he had a lot of touch points with clients, all asking the same two questions, which is, I want to look up data and I want to fill in forms in the field
Mm,
in in an easier way. That's just done badly across the board. A lot of the times, a lot of clients we're working with, it's still done on paper and pen.
mm,
And he just had this idea. Well, wouldn't isn't AI perfect for that? In a world where I could just speak into a device and it could understand, I'll put quotation marks there on understand, it could understand what's going on in order to help me do the jobs and tasks that I need to do quicker, whether that's looking up information or reporting on something. And so we kind of just went from there. And I think the most exciting thing has been going out to real frontline workers and showing it to them. Their kind of initial reaction is always, "Oh, another tool, another system, another." But then they actually see it working and they love it because instead of having to sit there for 20 minutes and write something up, they can just have a 3-minute conversation and all of that reporting and write up is done for them. The managers and like front of house staff love it because they're no longer having to read and retype handwritten forms. We had
mm,
one client um, who do video inspection surveys, and some of their front of house staff were watching those videos 4 times just to type out the key information that's in them.
mm,
And we said, no, just transcribe the video and then we'll create a summary for you. That's it's quick, super easy. And then that frees them up to do more important work like calling their clients and asking questions. It gives them much more time for that human interaction. And the techs in the workshop, it gives them more time to get on with doing what they're good at, which is fixing stuff or you know, teaching apprentices or whatever it is that they could spend more time doing than paperwork.
mm,
Um, the other thing is that it's just such a broad opportunity because anybody who works for a company and is not sat behind a computer is definitely doing paperwork or looking up information on
mm,
how to fix things, how to do things. And just think of the inefficiencies in your own life. I mean, we've all got a story where, I don't know, a fridge broke down and somebody came out to repair it and said, I don't have the correct part because I didn't know what the model number was. They come back 2 weeks later and they realize that that part doesn't fit in that particular. There's so many inefficiencies in in the world around us that are ripe for, fixing and sorting out. And AI, I believe, is a huge driver of finding and fixing those inefficiencies. Because one question we have to ask ourselves is, well, people have had tablets for decades now.
mm,
Why are we still putting things in paper and pen? And the answer is because it's faster than typing away on a tablet if you're not used to typing. What we found is everybody's used to talking. We do it all the time. So add in a bit of AI and you take out that middle step and you can make genuine efficiency savings and make and streamline your business. So it's yeah, it's been super rewarding to kind of see people actually use the product and actually love it.
Yeah, yeah. I think a little bit about it is the future that the people run to the streets and talk to themselves.
Well, we said the same thing in the early 2000s when people started wearing Bluetooth headsets and running down the streets. Like, there's always that moment of like, are they talking to me or are they talking to themselves? Um, but you know, for us, I'll give you a real world example. We're working with a company that installs doors and windows,
Mhm.
and they do that all over the country. They're UK based. They do it all over the country. But for every single installation, they have to do some paperwork for themselves internally to know that what was put where, what serial number of window was installed, what type of glass they put in, but also for the government, for the grants that they give out for making homes more efficient. The government has forms that they need to do. So what they were doing was 4 days a week, an installer would be out on the road driving to people's homes, completing jobs, taking measurements, going back to the workshop, completing jobs. And then on the fifth day, they would sit in a hotel room and take all of the photos they'd taken off their phones, go back to, so say they're doing that on Friday, they'd go back to Monday and write up a report of what they did. Then they go to Tuesday, and that would take a full day. Not only is that inefficient because you're spending a fifth of your time doing paperwork when your job is a installer of doors and windows, but also you're going to forget information. There's going to be by Friday you're going to forget what actually happened on Monday or why you put that window in backwards or whatever because there were real physical constraints you're just not going to remember. So our product, because we have a conversation with them through the AI when they're on site at the job, we can collect all of that information without having to spend another day unnecessarily filling in the paperwork. But we can capture all of the information, and the AI can actually guide them. Right, so it's like you haven't taken a photo of the final install, you haven't given me the serial number. If there's any missing information, that's caught at the point of entry for that data. So it's not just like speeding things up, but it's actually also improving data quality. So by the time it does get to us behind the desk as knowledge workers, it's actually there and in a good, good format and it's clean.
Mhm. Mm. Awesome. I think another hot topic actually it's all talk about is agentic AI. How does it fit into your platform?
Yeah, I think to be honest, agentic AI has really been the catalyst in allowing a product like Fieldpal to exist because it really elevates an AI product from a chatbot into a usable system or platform, which is what we have, right? So our platform has multiple capabilities. We can look up information from knowledge bases, API, anywhere a customer has data, we can look it up, whether that's from like a SharePoint repository, whether that's from a live API. We can also help people take notes and things and then also fill in reports. Those are fundamentally, for an AI, those are fundamentally very different things. The way that we want the AI to respond and talk to our users is completely different depending on the task that they're doing.
Mm,
So, one thing is making it agentic. We have those individual agents that present themselves through an orchestrator as one thing. So, if I say, "Ah, I've got a broken down fridge, it's the power supply unit, what do I do?" It will know which agent has what capabilities and where to look for that data without, opening up a whole can of worms of let's try and do XYZ at the same time. So we can really make bespoke products per client because we can have agents that only exist in certain clients' environments. So if I'm an automotive garage, I can have a system that is able to look up part numbers and prices. If I'm doing health and safety inspections on a wind farm,
mm,
that's going to be a completely different agent because it's got a whole host of
mm,
different ability. But to present themselves as kind of like one friendly chatbot, I hate the word chatbot now because of agentic AI. But like to present itself as kind of like one interface, if you like, and then we can kind of turn off and on agents. And then the other thing is the kind of like ability to preempt users' actions and do things before they turn up to a job site. and have those agents kind of run and doing things in the background is a game changer um, as well. And it really just, you know, we've all been frustrated on those websites where they've got a chatbot and you can kind of click one or two replies. Agentic AI for us has changed the game into a purely conversational. You can talk back and forth. It will tell you what it can and can't do. It will know what tools it can call and what APIs and data it has access to in a really kind of flexible and scalable way. So it's yeah, complete game changer.
Yeah. So you are an MVP in AI. So I think you get it when you are using Azure AI Foundry. Have you built up the company with Azure AI Foundry?
Yeah, so all of our models are in Azure AI Foundry. Our whole product sits on top of Azure, so it's there's architecturally there's a lot of different bits and pieces now. For example, we do a process that we call micro indexing, which is kind of like a secret sauce on top of some of the retrieval augmented generation
Mhm.
stuff that we're doing within Azure. So things like cognitive search. We do some pre-processing steps, but those are actually done by AI agents
Mm.
completely separately in the platform, and those all sit in Azure Foundry and talk to each other. And then obviously a huge part of our platform is the speech, which is all through Azure AI services and Azure AI Foundry as well. Then we've got lots of boring stuff like Kubernetes clusters and web apps and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera to fund it, like to uh, host the actual platform itself as well. But yeah, we're partnered with Microsoft. Microsoft have been really, really supportive. So if there's anybody listening or watching that's thinking, "Oh, I have a really good idea for a company that's got AI at its core," Microsoft has some really great supportive programs for helping you through that, giving you some Azure credit, giving you some kind of help and advice. So I definitely encourage you to look into that. I mean, other cloud platforms are available, but I only really know about the process with
Yeah.
Microsoft. Yeah.
This is the startup program, right?
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a number of different startup programs that they have. Some really early ones where you can get $5,000 of Azure credit just to kind of pad out an idea and give it a real architecture. And then there's also some industry-backed startup programs. So we're lucky enough to be backed by Barclays, which is a bank in the UK through Microsoft for some more Azure credit fundings.
Mm.
And then, through the MVP network, you can go and find an MVP and find one for yourself. But through the MVP network, we've got access to an amazing set of you know people like ourselves um, who have the knowledge and the skills and are kind of happy to share it. I
Yeah,
hope.
yeah. What I have seen is also some companies that build AI products. They're taking them to the show and promote it. Also, they're doing also marketing for this. It's really amazing. So,
Yeah, we're lucky enough to be in that position. So we are Microsoft's demo of choice in the Microsoft Innovation Hub for industrial workers. So if you do find yourself in a Microsoft Innovation Hub, you can ask for a demo of Fieldpal on the tablets, and that's amazing. That's opening us up to lots of different clients in lots of different sectors. But it's because we've made a very kind of usable, user-friendly demo that makes sense to a lot of people. Oh, I can fill in a form really, really quickly just using my voice. It's a really nice thing to demo. So Microsoft have been kind enough to be doing that across the world for us. Yeah.
yeah, I think Microsoft had this also. How it's called, Copilot Studio, to building, yeah, AI agents, and they have Foundry.
Yeah.
Why did you choose Azure AI Foundry? What's the reason, and why is it better for your product?
Really, really good question. I promise I didn't write these because that's exactly what I would have asked myself. Um, so for us, when we are working with workers and individuals who aren't even using Teams regularly, which is kind of alien to you and I because we're on Teams all the time, pinging each other. But that's our kind of world now. But when you're a car mechanic and you're just not using Teams, if you have a question, you probably just go into another room or you would call someone up on the mobile. Um, they're just not used to that platform. And we have to come to them where they are. So whether they're using the headsets, whether they're using tablets, we needed to make a kind of fully end-to-end platform where we can do everything we need to do, including recording videos whilst talking to our AI,
Mm,
uploading offline videos to be transcribed later, like lots of different niche things.
mm,
There are industries that I would actually go back to using Copilot Studio.
mm,
Basically, anywhere where that frontline worker is using Teams or M365 as their primary method of communication, actually having our product as uh, in Copilot Studio and just making it available to them would be really powerful and beneficial. The sort of industries that I'm thinking of when I say that is like in-home care workers. They're using Teams on their mobile all the time to talk to senior members of staff, etc., to get their scheduling and rotas and going back and forwards. So that's a perfect opportunity. The type of frontline workers that we have focused on so far are not using Teams every day. So we decided to build a kind of separate platform. But the nice thing about Azure AI Foundry and Copilot Studio is that should we ever need to build an agent that sits in Copilot, that's actually very easy to do now because we've got all of our APIs and our AI, and we can actually, through Copilot Studio, just link up that Copilot to our own backend AI. So if I ask a question through my tablet with the product, it won't actually make a difference if I asked it through a Teams agent, which is really nice because it's like we've decided to go one direction, but if we ever wanted to change that decision, it would be quite easy to do so, thanks to the tools that we've got and the backends, systems that we've got and the integrations into the platform um, that we've got. Really interesting kind of even further down the line is that we have some clients and use case areas
mm,
where the technicians don't even want an app. So we're actually thinking of, well, how can we turn our AI into like a phone agent that just calls you and says, "Tell me the information that I need to know,"
mm.
because they don't even want to open the app and use it. They're so used to using their hands and doing it that way. But again, everybody's used to in those industries is used to taking and making phone calls. So yeah, we're really interested to get our AI working through just ringing people up, basically.
I think the most people around the world using the large language models. What's your view on the small or special large language models?
Yeah. So the core of our product is actually a small language model. We do
Mm,
not use a large language model. Why? Because for us, domain expertise is incredibly important. We do not want, I'll give you a real example from one of our clients. They said before finding us, they were playing around with ChatGPT.
mm,
Alarm bell already going off, but they're playing around with ChatGPT to answer some of their questions. And he said to ChatGPT, "Okay, I've got a Land Rover in,
mm,
and its air conditioning system isn't working. What do I do?" And ChatGPT produced, or I would describe it as vomited out, a load of information not about Land Rovers, but about air conditioning systems in buildings and air conditioning systems in other cars. So that's actually less helpful
mm,
than a system that just says, "I don't know." So the beautiful thing about small language models is that they don't always have this kind of inherent confidence that they know everything because their training sets are, much smaller. And then we only expose what is available from our data sources. So we're only showing the AI, the small language models, real relevant data that okay, in that case, we found it using Azure AI Search, which is a really, really great product, by the way. So if you're interested in search and semantic search, an amazing product. I love it. Um, it will return really great relevant answers. And then all our small language model is doing is kind of reading those answers and presenting the most relevant bits of information, but not in an imagined, made up way.
mm,
So for us, small language models are actually more powerful than large language models because they don't get distracted. They don't go off down on tangents. They can only, uh, they're much more kind of focused in on what we want them to be focused in on. Now, the caveat to that is there's a lot more work to get all of that information in the right place. But once you do that, it's a lot more beneficial than just asking ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is you're gonna ask.
Yeah, I think a little bit about, then you have for every client, you have built a small language model because it's different to, I don't know, doors and windows, and the other repair, I don't know, the refrigerators. So you have developed for every client an own model?
So today we actually have just a core central language model that we kind of tweak and fine tune into those different industry use cases through some inventive prompting. So every single client runs off the same central model
Mhm.
in Azure Foundry, but it presents itself in a slightly different way. So if I was from an automotive garage, it would know that it knew about cars and automotive versus if it was for like an appliance manufacturer, we would know that. Our goal actually is to do what you're suggesting in that create kind of like domain specific knowledgeable small language models that we can kind of drop in and drop out. Why? Because today we have this onus on our client that they are bringing all of their information. So if you
Mm,
wanted to talk about Land Rover air conditioning systems, you have to have access to all of that documentation. That isn't necessarily realistic. So there are some circumstances. The medical field's a great one. Microsoft's done a load of work in creating like fine-tuned specific language models that understand medical terminology. There are examples like that where we would actually want to swap out the small language models, but it makes the platform more complicated and difficult to, yeah, administer. But it's definitely something we'll do in the future. The other benefit of a small language model is that one day we'll probably will have phones that are powerful to run versions of them locally as well,
mm.
right?
Okay.
Which is really important for some industries too.
And how did you handle the information architecture? Is it a RAG, agentic RAG, or LLM-Wiki, or how did you do it?
Yeah, so it's kind of agentic RAG as part of the product. So we have a Azure AI search, which does the retrieval, and then we show those results to an agent, which is doing the RAG status, um, and that's all done off like a tool call. So if the system recognizes that this is a piece of you're looking for a piece of information that it knows about, it can go and do that. The nice thing about that is that we don't actually care where the information is. So we can do an API call. We can look through a SharePoint repository at that point. We could even look in your emails or something if that was a
Mm,
connector you wanted to switch on. But we can build custom connectors and have our agent look through the kind of different databases separately. And then we have separate agents to do the other tasks, which are like a general kind of taking notes mode and report structure. So like, please fill in what you have done today or what you have fixed. But
mm,
the real benefit of them being agentic based is that you can flip from one to the other within the same conversation or the same session. So you can report and look up some information to put in that report really, really easily, and it will just flick across the different agents.
mhm. And I think also for your product, important is computer vision. And you are also an expert in computer vision. And also, I think, yeah, how fits it into your product? Uh,
Yeah, it's that's something we're kind of like actively working on a lot. Because part there's I would say there's two sides to it. There's one side which is incredibly easy, which is I've got this model fridge I use. Something like a serial number,
mm,
even with so they're a nightmare to write down. They're a nightmare to read out. Because this I'd have to say DG2026010. It's like this long laborious processes. Some of them are like 20 characters long, and people misread them or say numbers out of order all the time. So easy for computer vision. Just take a photo of that, do an optical character recognition run, which is available in the Azure AI suite, um, and that's great. We can get so we don't have to read that anymore. That also applies to things like barcodes, QR codes. We can actually scan them in our app and get all the information out of them really, really quickly. That's not really machine vision to me anymore. It is AI because we're doing things like OCR, but we can do that on the device. We can do that using the power of the phone or tablet or whatever we're doing.
mm,
The other side of it, which is much, much more complicated, is say I was installing. a window, and my company that I'm installing that window for requires me to take a photo of the completed job. So I take a photo of the completed job. They want the AI to be able to say, you have installed that window correctly, or you have not installed that window correctly. Now, there's some great, amazing tools, some of them in Microsoft, some of them out of Microsoft to do that. It is perfectly possible, but we need thousands of examples. Maybe these days we only need hundreds to do it kind of well. That it gets difficult because we're then saying to our clients, please provide us with your
mm,
last 1,000 window installs and we will make your own custom machine vision model. Ooh, it's a little bit tricky.
mm,
One thing we've been experimenting with, we haven't implemented yet, is actually can you use a large language model, not a small language model in this case, or well, it could be, I suppose, but a language model that can understand image inputs.
mm,
Can you use that to get a description of what is in the image and maybe compare that description to what's expected? So, for example, you could ask the LLM, can you see any large gaps between the frame? You could ask it specific questions. And that to me is kind of like a middle ground approach. We're using really advanced image recognition and machine vision AI in a way that it wasn't quite intended, but that avoids us having to build these like large custom models, which I'm quite reluctant to do because not only is it another thing to kind of maintain, but it's somebody else's data and that doesn't really make it easy for us to do it.
mm,
So the very, very basic solution we've gone for temporarily whilst we figure that out is give us an example of one example of good, one example of bad, and we'll show that to the user, and we can use their brain to do it because
yeah,
we still have humans in the loop, so use them when necessary.
mm, mm. Um, I think, yeah, the start from AI, it was text. I think now we are living in a multimodal AI world. What did you think? How good are these models? And what you say there are people use it on their, and I don't know, smartphones. Um, yeah, how I don't know how good are these models, and I think they're becoming bigger and bigger. How did you can you run it on a smartphone?
Yeah. So to me, sadly, they're a bit like cars, right? If you had a beat up old Ford Escort from 2004,
Mm,
uh, maybe it's not the best car in the world, versus a Formula One racing car that can do everything 0 to 60 in 0.1 second, whatever it is. They're only as good as the driver. If you put a terrible driver in a Formula One car, they're going to crash. If you put a terrible driver in a Ford Escort from 2004, they're going to crash. If you put a racing car driver in either of those, they're going to do better. But obviously, the Formula One car is going to perform better because it was designed to do more. For me, it's exactly the same. I think the biggest problem that I see in other people's projects or like students that I'm mentoring or introducing to AI for the first time is they don't know how to prompt. And I was really against prompt engineering when that came out as a phrase, by the way. I hated the phrase prompt engineering. But now I think it's a core skill. You have to be able to understand how the large language or small language models work in a vague capacity, what they're expecting and what they're going to output, because their performance is so hugely dependent on the quality of the question that goes in. We have this phrase which is shit goes in, shit comes out. It's so, so true. Because I'm constantly amazed by the accuracy and the performance that we're able to get out of these things if we show them and provide them the correct information. So actually, the most valuable part of our product isn't necessarily the way that the AI generates and shows you an answer. It's about that it gets the right answer in the first place in behind the scenes. And I think that's really, really important. Um, but having said that, so my last job, I was working in research and development at a large consultancy firm. The performance of small language models today far outweighs the performance of large language models several years ago. So we are moving incredibly quickly, incredibly
mm,
quickly. And there are
yeah.
language models you can run on on higher end
Mm,
devices and phones today that are good enough for some jobs. So they're good enough for summarization. They're good enough for you know, quick chat and messages.
mm,
They will. I don't think they'll ever be good enough to do kind of a deep research, go off and find me 20 links and analyze the results, etc. That some of the I think it's, I can't remember. It's the Copilot research agent, right? So cool, does loads. I don't think you'll ever have that running on your phone, sadly. Um, but I'm consistently impressed by the results when they're used correctly,
mm.
when the tools are used correctly.
Yeah. I think, yeah, AI, you say shit in, shit out, and AI is the particle accumulator for this, I think. How do you handle governance and security?
Yeah, so we're very reliant on Microsoft for governance and security. We have the platform completely hosted in Azure for exactly that reason. Microsoft put a hell of a lot more funding into security and platform stability than I can at a very small company. So yeah, we rely um, heavily on them. We use a lot of their security services and monitoring services. It was very interesting to me though, putting a company website up for the first time. This is the first company I've worked at where like I control the website and I can see who's trying to break into it and I can see the robots that are trying to pull information out of it. It's scary out there, man. It's, my personal website gets like 3 hits a month and they're all from humans, but our company website's getting hit, 100 times a day by robots trying to extract end files from us and things. I'm just like, oh my
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
it's the wild
I
west of things.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I use Cloudflare. They are really good. They're, yeah, it's really interesting. Also, I think actually 80%, like the field worker part, 80% of all company sites running on Cloudflare. It's also really interesting. Yeah, good. Um, so, yeah, I I I could, yeah, we are nearly at the end, so I can ask you, I have so many questions. We have to do another podcast, I think. It's so cool. It's so cool. Yeah, I have a rapid fire round. I ask questions and you give a short, yeah, a short answer. So, okay. When you think, when you developed, what's the best drink? Coffee, tea, or energy drink?
Energy drink.
And coding in the mirror or at the night, at the morning, and the night. It's
I'm
too
an
much.
afternoon coder. I don't work well in the morning and I don't work well in the evening. There's a sweet spot in the middle.
What's your favorite Azure service, but beside Azure AI Foundry?
Sorry, what's my favorite?
Azure service.
It's besides Azure AI Foundry, it's got to be Azure AI Search. I just think it's really, really good. And then k- just yeah, Azure hosted Kubernetes because there's nothing you can't do.
What's your favorite AI model?
My favorite AI model is 4.1 mini because I think it's just so flexible, but is small enough to do stuff. The Nano series are quite cool as well. Um, my I'll be cheeky and I'll give a second one, which is the GPT's image generation stuff. I think that's so
Mm.
cool.
What did you think about AI help on 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 programming?
Really great tool if you know how to use it. If you know what you're doing, best thing in the world. If you have no idea what you're doing, a really great starter. Hugely problematic for people who think they know what they're doing.
Is there one AI book, YouTube channel, or something everybody should know about?
Mm, that's a good question. I My favorite AI video, it doesn't actually teach you very much, but it's a generational neural network learning to play Mario. I just think it's such a good visualization of how computers really can learn over time by making mistakes. And I think that's a really important visualization is like we only learn by making mistakes, and the same is true for computers. We just have to correct them.
When you get an invite to the Listbusters TV series, what list will you boost?
About AI or in general?
Okay, then also general.
Um, in general, I this is crazy, but I really want to build a laser system to hit the Apollo 11 laser reflectors on the moon because they left laser reflectors, and everyone's like, "Did we really land?" I'm like, "You can do that. You can do it yourself. Just get a really powerful laser." In AI, I would love to bust the myth that like AI is going to replace jobs. I just don't think that's where we are today. Maybe in the future, it's just not good enough today. So let's think about how they augment people rather than replace.
If Satya Nadella comes to you and say, "Hey, Fergus, you get all the money and resources you need. What feature will you develop?"
Ooh, I all the money and all the resources, definitely robotic interaction with AI. I think we're doing so much amazing work with the kind of brains behind the systems, tool calling. Let's put them in something more useful than Elon's human powered robots.
Yeah, it's really funny. I have started my career at KUKA, and we have
Yep.
done infrared scanning systems for systems. And now, what's now happened? It's so amazing. It's really cool. Yeah. So, what when you say from this session, what is the thing that people should know, or yeah, when the only thing, one information they can grab? What's the main information today?
But what I always say to people at the end of sessions like this is try it. You know, go on go on Azure, go on AWS. I don't care what it is. Go and try it. There's free accounts, there's free trials. All of these services have free tiers. Go and try them, go and use them because they're a lot of fun. And once you start trying and using and playing with these services, that's when the ideas come to you. Like, oh well, I see this problem in my real life and I see a solution here. So make the most of that. If you happen to be a student watching this, get your Azure student $120 credits. If you're not, use the free tiers, sign up, give it a play because you learn way more by doing and playing than you do by any other method, I think.
Okay, and finally, who shall be the next guest on the podcast, and what question shall I ask them?
Interesting. I have two answers for you. One is
Okay.
our founder for Fieldpal AI, James Woodall, because he can come and talk to you all about the wearable compute world and how that came to be and why companies like Meta are not doing as well as companies focusing on the enterprise like these ones. And then I'll also tag in my fellow MVP, Josh McDonald, who can come in and talk about how Azure and Microsoft are actually securing stuff behind the scenes because he's a security MVP. I believe he's also an AI MVP now. So he's a really knowledgeable guest around some of the questions that I kind of skimmed over about security. I'm just like, leave it to Microsoft. Josh will be able to explain that in a little bit more
Yeah,
detail.
yeah, that's a real good topic. Yeah, you have to make me the introduction, and
Yeah.
and my brain in. Yeah, so Fergus, thank you for joining me today on the podcast and sharing your insights, especially about Azure AI Foundry, Agentic AI, and computer vision, and how, yeah, I say artificial intelligence can empower the frontline workers beyond, yeah, the traditional office workers. Yeah, this was amazing, and I think uh, I don't know if I ever never expected I get someone in my podcast who built a Mars rover.
I'll caveat that with built a piece of software for one of the camera subsystems, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you, and, yeah, this
Yeah,
was an amazing session. Thank you so much.
great. Thank you so much for the invite, and yeah, hope to be back at some point.